But where the water is flowing in our waterfall there, it gives us a stop-start. Because let's remember, 1790 we were built, there is no electric in the mill at all. So the miller needs a stop-start. From within the mill, there is a weight on a chain, as you will have seen from the video. And at the moment that is down, like an old set of scales. If it's down, the trapdoor is open. But when the miller is ready to mill, he'll raise that stone, which shuts the trapdoor in the launder, cutting off the water from dropping down to the trough, and the water now flows to our wheel. This conveyor belt lifts up the powder and drops it onto our grading sieve. She's suspended on 4 hooks, and she's got that circle centre that's offset, so she jiggers all the time. And that's a nickname, the jigger, because she does the dance all the time.
Hello and welcome to another video. We are in New Abbey. We've already been around Sweetheart Abbey, and this is the new Abbey Corn Mill. It's £4.50 to get in, and half price if you are an English Heritage member, so that's worth bearing in mind. So let's go in.
So, Trevor is no longer with us, Bobby is no longer with us. Hello, sir. So, there has been a mill on this site since medieval times. It used to be a little single-storey mill, and it was run by the monks, the Cistercian monks from Sweetheart Abbey. Yeah. But it was just a little thatch building, and the water trickled underneath the wheel. But that is only 20% efficient. So when Mr. William Stewart, Laird of New Abbey, decided that he wanted to build a mill, he did it because the Thurlage Act was in place. And that said that if the Laird had a mill, everyone by law must go to that mill. So he built us a beautiful 2-storey mill with a kiln with a miller's cottage. Very unusual to have the kiln attached to the mill, because milling is very dusty, and dust and naked flames don't go together. But because the little mill was already here, or the monk's mill was already here, so were the watercourses. So the pond that is just behind that copper beech hedge was already here. So that's why we're on this little plot of land, and everything is cramped together. But he did put in the launder here, because it helps us fetch our water. In the olden days, the water would have come from the catchment of Criffel and Auchendoch, which are the 2 hills behind. They would flow down into Loch Kinder, which is about a mile up the way, and then through the Sheepfoot Burn would run down to the back of the old village, and the old houses do have this lade running through their gardens.
Okay.
In Mr. Stewart's time, they were tenants, so they'd have kept it clear. Unfortunately now, the village has increased much in size. We've got new roads and people have private houses, so we don't get our water the old way anymore. So when we want water, we have to borrow it from the River Pow under licence from DEFRA if you were in England, but SEFRA up here, and we pump it up. We top our pond up just by about a foot, and then we can use the water. And we bring it along our launder, which is that wooden trough there, to our wheel, because running underneath is 20% efficient, running out from the top is 80% efficient, because you've not just got the power, you've got the weight.
Yeah.
So ours comes in at the 1 o'clock, and then we turn in a clockwise motion, and we're called a pitch back because she seemingly turns back. In England it would be more common for it to be an extra metre longer or a yard longer, as it would have been. Come in at the 11, but you're an overshot then. Still doesn't matter, exactly the same, 80% efficient. But where the water is flowing in our waterfall there, it gives us a stop-start. Because let's remember, 1790 we were built, there is no electric in the mill at all. So the miller needs a stop-start. From within the mill, there is a weight on a chain, as you will have seen from the video. And at the moment that is down, like an old set of scales. If it's down, the trapdoor is open. But when the miller is ready to mill, he'll raise that stone, which shuts the trapdoor in the launder, cutting off the water from dropping down to the trough, and the water now flows to our wheel. So we've got this beautiful 2-storey mill with the kiln and the miller's cottage. However, it was only 9 years after Mr. Stewart built the mill that the Thirlage Act got cancelled. It was repealed. It had been in place nearly 100 years and it was really bad for the actual farmer. He was having money took off him left, right and centre, and it was really bad. Now the farmers could choose which mill they wanted to go to. Now if you were still in New Abbey the village, you would still come here because we're your closest. But if you were New Abbey the area that used to be forced to come here, you'd find a closer mill. But we put in the storage floor to encourage people to come to us. So society is damp and wet, and their milled product they could only keep for 2 to 3 months. We, on the other hand, could keep it for up to a year because we have the beautiful radiator wall thanks to our kiln. So we could store the finished product up there on the top floor. But what it did do, putting in the floor, was steal our daylight. So if we look to the tall windows now, you can actually realise that the floor goes across the windows, covered by the wires, which cut off half the light from the big windows and all the light from the roof lights. It's now compacted this space, and our dust here is really quite significant. And added to the dust is all the smoke from the drying floor, because this is the only entrance onto the drying floor. So it went from having lots of space to get that dust and fumes to quite a close quarters, which would have made the mill quite a nasty place really. But do come in and I'll show you around the kiln.
Very interesting. Okay.
This is our kiln. So our kiln is a beautiful funnel shape. She's got a small controllable fire here at the bottom, but a fantastic great big drying area upstairs. So she is a coal-fed fire, and the coal would have come by boat because anything that was heavy was brought by boat. So it probably came from either the Lake District coalfields or Liverpool. So we feed the fire from the front, but the next hole round as you walk round our kiln is where the children would have cleaned out the ashes and reset the next fire. And then as you come all the way round, you will see at the back a hole into the mill itself. And that is where in the next process, we're going to take off that husk. So nature protects the groats of oats with a paper husk, but we don't want to eat that. So we're going to shell them off. But they've been dried upstairs. So they are the perfect fire lighters. So when we take them off, a fan will blow them back through and we can use them as fire lighters. But please take a little walk round, and when you go round you will realise that this wall here, you see it a bit better down there, is the old wall from the medieval mill.
Oh my goodness.
Because it's big boulders, thin slats, it's pebble size, it's big more boulders. I call it the higgledy-piggledy wall.
Yeah.
Because when we were built in 1790, we knew to cut the stone into brick-like shapes for power and strength, whereas the old walls were not as strong.
How old were the kids when they started working in the mill?
If you were the miller's kids, you would do some chores before school, like cleaning out the ashes, cleaning out the horses, kicking out the cats. But girls started at the age of 5. Boys, probably because you went to school, you didn't start till you were 14.
Oh my goodness, that's
Not
terrible.
teenagers.
5-year-old.
A 5-year-old.
Quick, around the back.
Do take a tour around and we'll talk more about that when we get inside. I'll tell you what we did.
Hello.
Hello. See some of the machinery there.
Yes.
There's the medieval wall.
Beautiful.
Mind your head, mind your step.
There's a besom, a fine besom.
Yes. Got a step down there, so.
I decorated one of those on our wedding day.
Yeah, I remember we jumped over it.
What was that? The broom?
Yeah.
Oh right, really?
We took the broomstick.
Sweeping out the old and in with the new.
Yeah.
So this would have been the coal sheds, but we've just got a couple of examples of French burr, which is our finishing stones. But if you just duck and we'll go outside, I'll show you the shelling stones first. So these are our shelling stones. They're called Derbyshire Greys. So Derbyshire's a place in England on the Pennines, and we still can get them today. They're commonly known as millstone grit because that's what we use them for. But millstones work in pairs. The bottom stone is called the bedstone because it doesn't get up, and the top stone is the one that's going to do all the work. So she is being cut for our machinery so she can do the work, but at one glance I can see she is my span in depth. That means she's 8 inches, and all millstones are cut to a depth of 8 inches. They're different diameters, ours are quite large, but they're all at that same depth. So I equally know that this one has worked very hard and over the years has ground herself down. So she's now only 2 inches in depth. But the item that we use is a little double pointed hammer, and it's called a thrift. And that is what the miller will put in the furrows and ridges. They're in a harp-like pattern as they go round, but it's where we get the word being thrifty.
Oh.
Because if you are good with your thrift, then you can make your stone last as long as you can.
Oh.
And it probably could have got thinner than she is, but she chipped. And because she's chipped, when the stones go round, that centrifugal force chops them up one side and doesn't work for us. But we'll go into the mill and we'll see the next bit. So to the left there is the weighted chain. So that's the one that is holding up that trapdoor that at the moment was letting the trough pour water and miss the wheel. But when the miller is ready to mill, he raises that stone which shuts the trapdoor outside and it starts our gearing off. So if we look to the back of the gearing shed, the pit wheel at the back mirrors the water wheel outside exactly. That in turn turns the wallower, which is the small beer cap type gearing, on our solid oak tree trunk that goes vertically, and then it turns our great big flat spur wheel. But although she looks black and like they're all made out of metal, that great big flat spur wheel has got wooden teeth. Ours are made out of apple, and they're commonly made out of cherry as well. So they're the middle strength woods. Fruit trees always grow by water, because we're going to eat the fruit as well. And when we were bequeathed the mill in 1979, there was a sack of these already done. So I would guess that the children make them every winter. But these act as a fire break. If we had metal on metal and the gearing slipped, we could make a spark and we would explode because of the dust. But by having wood going in between, no fires.
It's like homeopathy, like for like. Seriously, it's the same with plants. If you've got a rose bush and you want to, protect it, you can spray it with rose essential oils,
All right.
Obviously diluted.
Yes.
And it's the same with human beings as well. It's like for like. So you can take a remedy, for a particular thing, and it will have that thing in.
Oh, right, I see what you mean.
Yes.
Oh, very
so it's
good.
like for like.
Very good. So we come to the oats coming in. They get taken upstairs and dropped onto the drying floor. When they're dry, depending how wet they are when they come in for the fields, minimum of 4 to 6 hours, maximum 2 to 3 days, but they'll be dry. When they're dried, swept simply with a broom down the shaft into the sacks, and the men carry them up on their backs, back up the 2 flights of stairs, again for the second time. They then go through those Derbyshire Greys we saw outside, and everything falls into our bolting machine. We've lifted up the panel so you can see it is a rotating drum. But if you actually look to the light there, you can see she's a sieve, and she's sieving out any of those stones that have ground themselves down, the grit, but also all the mud that would have come in with the grain. And lots of mud would have come in because farms were really, really tiny. and therefore every grain counted. Farmers were only rich enough just to feed their own family. They didn't own their own equipment and they didn't own their own horses. They rented them when they needed them from the laird. So the children would have been in the floor getting every last grain, but with the mud. But it's been dried, it's been through the stones, and now it's a fine powder. It falls through the grit sack and goes into the grit. But waste not, want not. The grit sack is given back to the same farmer because he's got chickens, geese or ducks. In order to lay eggs, they need to eat grit, as they still do today. We do pulverised deep oyster shells now, but they ate the grit back. It got put in with their feed. But the husks that were being taken off tumble out like petals. The fan is blowing and blows those petals next door to the back of the kiln. But the heavy groats, ready for milling, have fallen to the floor. And in this wooden housing here, inside, is a conveyor belt with little scoops on. It scoops up the grains. We can fill our sacks and they go back upstairs again, thanks to the men. So our sacks are not too heavy in this mill. They're about 56 pounds, half a hundredweight, which is about 28 kilos. But in some mills, they went up to 200 pounds. So that's 4 times the weight of our sacks. But I think because we didn't have a sack hoist for the first 80 years, and the men were carrying them, they were smaller quantities. But we did finally get a sack hoist, and it's this one here, but it is very, very simple. I can work it down here, and this rope is the power of the water wheel, and that would then pull the sack one at a time up through the trapdoors. But this is a very basic one. It's just one sack all the way to the top. Someone must be on the top floor to take it off, and then it's the weight of the chain itself, when there's no power from the water wheel, thrown down the hatch that would bring the chain back down. So the theory is that as the bag goes up, so the trapdoors open, when it passes they shut, but in reality they'd have left them open because there's the trapdoors, and that's not big enough for when the rope goes to a double and from a double to the links. So they would have left them open when they were working it. But do come up and I'll show you the stones.
It's actually a very eco-friendly way of production as well, because you're not wasting anything.
No, we're not. It's brilliant. They use every last little bit. And even at other mills, I don't know that they did it here, but the husks were fed to the pigs as well.
Really?
Yeah. But like I say, I don't know that we did that. I know we used them as firelighters. So this is our kiln floor where the grain would come to dry. It's perforated iron sets on the floor, letting through all the heat and the smoke. But there's no wood in the ceiling, so it doesn't go on fire. However, this is the only entrance in and out. So every time you open this, you've got the smoke. Hence, if you look at our beams, they look like we've been on fire, and we haven't. But it finally pitters out over there. But that smoke added to the dust once this floor got put in, making this a much worse area. And you can see now how much light was stolen from the big windows, and we're not getting anything from the roof lights. So originally it would have just been the back 2 sets of stones. They're the shelling stones we've discussed, and these are now our finishing stones. The finishing stones are French burr, like the example behind. It is a freshwater river quartz. It came from the bedrock of the River Marne that flows to the east of Paris. But everybody wanted it, all the nations. Portugal, Spain, Germany, Belgium, France, Great Britain as she was, we all wanted this rock. By the end of the 1800s, it did not exist. You can't get it anymore because everybody wanted it. So our grains are now falling from the top hopper to the middle, from the middle into the stones. Our oatmeal is being thrown out by centrifugal force, but because the runner stone goes round in the same direction all the time, it brings the flour powder around the inside of that shoe until it is caught in the metal trap at the foot of the second conveyor belt. This conveyor belt lifts up the powder and drops it onto our grading sieve. She's suspended on 4 hooks, and she's got that circle centre that's offset, so she jiggers all the time. And that's a nickname, the jigger, because she does the dance all the time. Anything on the top is too big and gets remilled. But if we can get through the first sieve to where the handle is, that would have been your coarse oatmeal. That's what they would have eaten as porridge. And then where the handle is now, that is set up with another sieve, and if it gets to the bottom, it's fine enough for flour, or oatmeal still to us, but to them it was their flour. So that's the life of the oats, and we've heard some of the life of the mill, like getting the extra flour. However, oats went out of fashion, and that's all it was, a fashion, because they are really good and lower your cholesterol, but they're gluten-free. Therefore, nothing rises. And in the middle of the 1700s, the sandwich had just been invented. So lo and behold, what do we want? Loaves of bread. Here in Galloway, we couldn't grow the white grains. The strain of grain that was around at the time didn't like wet roots, so it rotted in the fields. If we could have grown it, we would have grown it. We'd have got 4 times the price per sack. So the farmers would have been a lot better off. But later in the mill's life, we come to 1864. Robert Welsh is now our miller, and he puts in the provender stones. The provender stones so named because provin is the name for animal feed, and that's what these stones are for. The grain still has to be dried, but now we just put everything in there. Husks, mud, grit and grain. Everything goes in there and it's all mashed up together. And what do we get? Bran mash. And that is what horses still eat today. But if you cake that together, in the olden days you had animal cakes. Nowadays, factories turn it into pellets and feed it other animals. But it's really good and really healthy. But as we said downstairs, children would work in the mill. It wasn't just the men. There was 15 staff when we first started, and when we finished in 1945, there was only 5 staff. But in the earlier days of the mill, young girls would have worked in the mill. So it's not just the cotton mills that we see in the black and white photographs, but it's also here. And it's because everyone had large families. And if the boys went to get a bit of an education from the religious leader in the village, the girls were left to work. So they became the alarm. So we're checking that enough grain goes from the top hopper to the middle, from the middle down the shoe, and that damsel, the triangle piece of metal there, is putting it in the stones, because the stone is running with the power of the water wheel. And if they run empty, they'll run hot. And we don't want that. And that's where the phrase, keep your nose to the grindstone, comes from.
Oh.
You're smelling to make sure you're not going on fire or burning.
That's interesting.
So a girl would sit where that lamp is from the age of 5. But we're also going to teach her some skills. So we give her a darning needle and some rough cord, and she mends our sacks for us. And she's learning to thread needles and learning to sew at a very basic stage. As they get older, they can do the grading sieve, and if one of the girls shows aptitude, she could go with the miller and learn to help him do his journals, which is logging in the sacks, the weights, the cost, and which farmers got what. But the boys were at school. But what did we do once the girls went to school? The law changed in 1863 that said girls now could go to school, but it filtered down to the communities at a longer space because we already had jobs. But all they did was they fitted that metal bar to the back of the saddle. So now we have a metal bar with a metal spoon and a little bell. And as that damsel is putting the grain through, so it rhythmically hits the spoon, which rings the bell. And they're all very used to ticking clocks. But if there's silence, it's the silence that's the alarm. And then they know that they've got to come and refill the hopper. And nowadays, we work the other way round. We're woken up by an alarm clock. We change our lessons at school by the school bell. And if there happened to be a fire, it would be an alarm that told us. But in those days, it wasn't. If the belt came off one of these wheels, by the jigger stopped dancing, the miller would instantly know something was wrong by the silence. And it's just the way that life has changed or gone on.
That's really interesting.
But if we go upstairs, I'll show you the workings of the sack hoist. Beautiful, light, bright, airy. When the floor that we're standing on wasn't here, this 2-story mill would have been fantastic. Should have been beautiful. But by putting it in, it gave us the storage as we discussed against the radiator wall. It helped us further by the top hoppers are now sunk into the floor, so we're not having to heft those sacks high over our shoulders. And later on in the mill's life, it gave us space for the sack hoist. The metal work there and the first wheel turn all the time, but nothing happens because the belt is loose until from downstairs or up here, because as you can see there's no other latches, catches or anything, you'll lift the weights at the back, which has now connected that and made it a drive shaft. So now it's winding, and that winds that spindle at the back, which is pulling our sacks up. But as I said, somebody would have to be here because our sack hoist is so basic, there's no dead man switch. So if I was downstairs and I kept pulling, the sack would get stuck in the wheel. In other mills, there's a simple metal bar that comes down with a loop on it, goes around the rope there, and as the sack comes up and hits that bar, it pushes it up, which would knock a plank, which would be like a dead man's switch to stop this working. But ours is basic. But we must thank the Stewart family twice. So it was Mr. William Stewart the Laird who built our mill, but it is his 5-time great-grandson, now living in Shambelly House across the way in the 1970s. And the building was in rack and ruin because we finished milling in 1945 when Edgar Klingen, the last miller here, ceased working. And then it just went derelict. So it was Charles Stewart then who paid for the new roof. He repaired the water wheel outside, but he couldn't get the stones to work because all the workings had been thrown outside thinking a wooden building would rot and fall down. He bequeathed it to Historic Scotland in 1979, and we opened 3 years later by Magnus Magnusson of the Big Black Chair, mastermind, and he opened us as a working mill. So although we can't sell our product because we can't wash down and get the health and safety, we do mill. And everything in this mill still works apart from one machine, and that's the most recent machine. It's the one on the ground floor, and I'll show you on the way out.
Excellent. That's wonderful though.
So it's great that they gave it back to the community and everybody else to see as a museum. See, after doing that one. Well, up and down, of course. What went up had to come down. So this piece of machinery over here is the most recent piece of equipment in the mill. It came in 1907 and it's called an oat bruiser, and that's all it's going to do. It's for animal feed only. So the grain comes down, but now we've got 2 rollers going through, which our mill is all to do with milling on stones, but now we've got the rolling system coming in. And that roller is going to stretch our grain of oats, which in the late 1800s, Mr. Quaker in America gave us our porridge oat that we recognise today by steam rolling the groats. So that's where you get your flake. We're all about the milled product. So the oat bruiser just bruises the grains, and it's basically breaking the actual kernel so you can get to the inside, so that the animals can digest it much quicker and therefore fill up much more. But the reason she's never been restored by ourselves, if you look to the left hand side, there's a very crude, shall I say, weld, and then they've put a clamp brace round it. But because it was repaired in its time and they used it, it's not something we would repair to try and reuse now, I'm afraid. So I hope you've enjoyed your tour.
Brilliant.
If when you go out you want to take a tour around, you can go up the steps to this side. That will take you on top of the launder so you can see where the trapdoor is, and then it will take you up to the pond, and then you can just walk back down and you'll be back in the shop.
That's great, thank you very much.
This is brilliant, thanks so much.
No problems at all.
Thank you.
So we'll have a look outside now. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's brilliant. My dad would have liked this.
He would have loved it.
And today is his 7th anniversary of passing.
Oh, he's probably with us anyway in spirit.
It's very fitting that we've come here today. He would have loved it.
Yes, he would have done.
And I was brought up with all this kind of thing anyway, having the kind of father that I had, you know, he was an expert in industrial archaeology and metallurgy and engineering.
This is very pretty up here, isn't it? Yeah, there's the valve.
Yeah.
Drop that and the water goes down onto the wheel.
Wow.
No, it's in the off position at the moment. Wonder if the artist has finished his sketch. It looked pretty good. Hopefully they'll sell it. There's a nice little garden as well. They've got foxgloves down there. Right, so there you have it, New Abbey Mill. I hope you enjoyed the video. Many thanks to our tour guide today. And please like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you again very soon.
And ding the notification bell.
Yes,
ding ding.
give it a jolly good dinging.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.